On March 12, 2026, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the public for the first time since the outbreak of war with Iran. But right in the middle of his speech, boasting about Israel's unrivaled global strength, air raid sirens began screaming across central Israel. Before he even finished talking, the IDF confirmed another wave of Iranian ballistic missiles was inbound. It was the sixth attack that day alone, and there was absolutely nowhere to hide from it. On March 12, 2026, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the public for the first time since the outbreak of war with Iran. But right in the middle of his speech, boasting about Israel's unrivaled global strength, air raid sirens began screaming across central Israel. Before he even finished talking, the IDF confirmed another wave of Iranian ballistic missiles was inbound. It was the sixth attack that day alone, and there was absolutely nowhere to hide from it. 13 days into this massive conflict, after obliterating over 6,000 targets and burning through more than $11 billion in just the first week, Iran is continuously launching ballistic missiles at Israeli soil. Netanyahu tried his best to look strong. He spoke confidently about toppling the regime and wiping out Iran's top leadership. But buried deep within that exact same press conference was a shocking admission. It completely destroys the narrative that both Israel and the United States have been feeding the public since the very first bombs were dropped. And once you catch this detail, the entire reality of this war shifts completely. Over the next few minutes, I am going to decode exactly what Netanyahu slipped up and admitted, why American intelligence entirely disputes his boldest claims, and where this explosive conflict is actually headed. Let us look back at what we were told during week one. The IDF proudly announced the destruction of 300 Iranian missile launchers. Reports celebrated a 70% decrease in Iranian strikes against Israel. Officials assured us that nearly 3/4 of Tehran's launch capacity was completely erased. The combined message from Washington and Jerusalem was loud and clear. Overwhelming military dominance, mission almost accomplished, and Iran brought to its knees. Now, fast forward to what Netanyahu just said on day 13. He explained to reporters that Iran had been securing its missile silos and nuclear facilities deep beneath the Earth's surface. He stated that if the coalition had not struck when they did, those weapons would have been entirely immune to any future assaults within a matter of months. Pay close attention to that word, immune. That is not how a victorious commander describes a defeated enemy. That is a leader desperately trying to justify why the opposition is still firing back. He is openly confessing that their military campaign has strict limitations and that there are strategic assets the coalition simply cannot touch. One journalist broadcasting live from Ramallah caught this immediately, pointing out the massive contradiction between this statement and the optimistic claims officials had been making since the initial strikes. The enemy is still very much in the fight. Quick pause before we dive deeper into this. Thank you so much for watching. Your ongoing support is exactly what keeps this channel alive, and I truly value your time. Please remember to subscribe and leave a like on this video so the algorithm shares this crucial update with more people. Returning to the events of March 12th, Iran unleashed 6 distinct waves of ballistic missiles. At the exact same time, Hezbollah fired over 200 rockets from Lebanon into central Israel. The IDF quickly labeled this a highly coordinated joint assault. One missile destroyed a home in Hanyel, while another rocket struck a residence in Beina, leaving civilians injured. Educational institutions across the nation are still closed down. Israel remains paralyzed under a nationwide state of emergency. Keep in mind, this is 2 weeks into a military operation that was promised to be incredibly fast and definitive. Netanyahu himself went on Fox News on the 4th day and promised a quick, decisive victory. It has been the exact opposite. The most tragic single incident of this entire war happened just days prior in Beit Shemesh, roughly 18 miles outside of Jerusalem. An Iranian ballistic warhead slammed directly into a communal shelter located inside a synagogue. 9 innocent civilians lost their lives and dozens more were severely injured. 2 Israeli defense interceptors were launched to stop the incoming threat, but both completely missed their mark. And here is the detail that should send shivers down the spine of every military strategist watching. The early warning sirens in that specific area failed to activate in time to provide the standard 90-second window to take cover. We know Iranian ballistic missiles can travel to Israel in just about 10 minutes. The whole Israeli civil defense strategy heavily relies on rapid detection, immediate siren alerts, and flawless interceptions. In Beit Shemesh, all 3 of those critical pillars collapsed at the exact same time. This is not just a minor technical error. This exposes a fundamental vulnerability in the absolute core of Israel's survival architecture. When your interceptors fail and your sirens are delayed, a bomb shelter stops being a safe haven. It becomes a death trap. Stick with me here because what Netanyahu said next regarding regime change completely shatters the narrative American intelligence has been briefing to the White House for weeks. This massive disconnect is the most critical fracture in the entire war right now. The Prime Minister told the press that a primary objective is creating the right environment for Iranian citizens to overthrow their oppressive government. But when a reporter pressed him on whether he could actually guarantee that result, he folded. He openly admitted he could not promise with 100% certainty that the regime would collapse unless the Iranian people physically rose up themselves. He literally told the citizens of Iran that help is coming, but ultimately the burden is on them. Just process that for a second. We have a wartime leader deep into an active offensive, basically admitting that military force alone will not achieve his primary political goal. The United States dubbed this campaign Epic Fury. Israel named it Operation Roaring Lion. The very first wave of attacks on February 28th successfully eliminated Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei via a precision strike on his compound in Tehran. Billions of dollars burned, thousands of flight missions executed, the Supreme Leader assassinated. Yet the main architect of these strikes says the final victory still relies on everyday Iranian civilians rioting in the streets. Now compare that exact sentiment with the official assessments from U.S. intelligence. A highly classified report generated by the National Intelligence Council, finalized before a single bomb was dropped, strictly determined that neither limited targeted strikes nor a massive, drawn-out military invasion would successfully trigger regime change in Iran. That crucial document was drafted in February 2026. Keep in mind, the National Intelligence Council is not some random think tank. It speaks for the unified consensus of all major U.S. intelligence branches. Ever since that first report, numerous follow-up analyses have consistently echoed the exact same warning. Inside sources confirm a flood of intelligence briefings constantly reminding leadership that the Iranian government is not facing imminent collapse and still heavily controls its population. The latest of these reports was finalized mere days before Netanyahu's press conference. Even a high-ranking Israeli official secretly confessed to Reuters that there is absolute uncertainty regarding whether this war will actually break the clerical government. And the situation gets incredibly more complicated from here. Iran did not spiral into total anarchy after Khamenei was taken out. Instead, they quickly consolidated their power. The Assembly of Experts met within mere days and officially appointed Mojtaba Khamenei, the deceased leader's son, as the new supreme leader. Geopolitical analysts widely consider him far more radical and uncompromising than his father ever was. His debut address to the nation was broadcasted across Iranian state media, though he noticeably did not appear on video. Naturally, this sparks massive questions regarding his current hiding location and his overall physical security, but the actual message he delivered was fiercely defiant. He swore total vengeance for spilled Iranian blood and made it crystal clear that the Strait of Hormuz would be weaponized to choke the Western world. The regime did not crumble. It simply promoted the next man up. It continued issuing orders. It continued firing missiles. When asked about the ultimate fate of Mojtaba and Hezbollah's leader Naim Qassem, Netanyahu casually dropped a very public death threat. He joked that if he were selling life insurance, he would immediately deny policies to both men. Predictably, that catchy soundbite grabbed all the media headlines. But take a step back and analyze what it actually implies. Nearly 2 weeks into the most financially draining military endeavors since the 2003 Iraq War, the man running the show is still throwing out personal threats toward the exact two men whose deaths were supposed to be the entire justification for the conflict. They are still breathing. The government remains totally, fully operational. The chain of command is unbroken, and the warheads are still raining from the sky. We will dive into the devastating financial consequences of this war in a moment, but we need to address another massive front line first. During the press conference, a journalist grilled Netanyahu over a bold claim he made 2 years ago, and his defensive answer exposed a massive reality Israel desperately wants to avoid discussing. The reporter boldly reminded the prime minister that back in 2024, he promised the Israeli public that targeted military operations had crippled Hezbollah, setting them back 2 full decades. The follow-up question was devastatingly simple. If that was true, how is Hezbollah currently managing to shoot 200 rockets into Israel every single day? Netanyahu completely dodged a direct answer. Instead, he pivoted. He argued that the initial threat models were apocalyptic, predicting falling skyscrapers in Tel Aviv, 20,000 dead citizens, and completely leveled cities. He claimed none of that nightmare scenario happened because Israel took extremely aggressive preemptive action against Hezbollah. But then he slipped up again, destroying his own narrative. He openly admitted on live television that Hezbollah still maintains the capability to continuously attack Israeli soil. You have a sitting prime minister directly confessing that a hostile army he proudly declared defeated 2 years ago is currently running non-stop offensive bombardments against his nation right now. And the facts on the ground validate that perfectly. On March 12th, the IDF executed highly unusual airstrikes on Hezbollah targets deep inside central Beirut, completely outside their normal strongholds. That represents a massive escalation in their targeting strategy. Meanwhile, Israeli infantry units pushed significantly deeper into the southern regions of Lebanon to hunt down Radwan force infrastructure. Defense Minister Israel Katz publicly threatened the Lebanese government, stating Israel is entirely willing to expand its ground invasion and officially commanded all civilians living south of the Zorani River to flee immediately. Behind closed doors, senior Israeli military officials are sounding the alarm that Hezbollah still possesses a massive stockpile of rocket launchers and fully intends to drag the IDF into a brutal war of attrition. Israel is effectively trapped in a brutal two-front conflict, and neither battlefield has a logical end in sight. Now let us look at the catastrophic global numbers that tie this entire disaster together. The incredibly vital Strait of Hormuz has been essentially paralyzed for almost 2 full weeks. The IRGC boldly announced that not a single drop of crude oil would be allowed to transit, threatening to incinerate any cargo ship daring enough to try. Ever since February 28th, maritime authorities have tracked at least 16 distinct strikes against commercial freighters navigating near the choke point. 8 sailors have tragically lost their lives, and 1 remains completely missing. Approximately 150 giant cargo vessels are currently trapped in the region. Iran has also scattered roughly a dozen naval explosives right into the shipping lanes. The U.S. Armed Forces confirmed they destroyed 16 Iranian mine-laying boats near the strait right after Donald Trump aggressively warned Tehran against using naval mines. However, the existing mines had already been deployed. The global financial reaction was instantaneous. Brent crude oil prices violently spiked from around $73 per barrel right before the bombs dropped to well over $130 within the exact same 10-day window. Across the United States, gasoline prices skyrocketed by 17% practically overnight. The crisis reached such critical mass that the International Energy Agency stepped in, officially declaring its 32-member countries would dump 400 million barrels of emergency oil reserves onto the market. This marks the most massive coordinated release in the organization's entire history. Over in Saudi Arabia, officials panicked and began desperately diverting all maritime logistics toward Red Sea terminals to avoid the dangerous strait entirely. Meanwhile, the IRGC broadcasted a very blunt message to the global economy. Brace yourselves for $200 oil, but crude oil is just a fraction of the total cost here. The Pentagon recently testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee, verifying that the initial 6 days of military strikes completely drained over $11.3 billion from the Treasury. This officially makes it the most financially draining American combat operation since the early days of the Iraqi invasion. Well over 130 different municipalities across Iran have been leveled, and the collateral damage extends way beyond America and Israel. Iran has been blindly lashing out at neighboring Gulf nations. Saudi defensive grids had to shoot down 12 suicide drones on March 12th alone. The United Arab Emirates intercepted an incoming barrage of 10 ballistic missiles and 26 drones on the very same afternoon. Qatar was forced to completely halt its liquefied natural gas output at its 2 premier facilities after direct Iranian missile strikes damaged the infrastructure. Because Qatar is a massive supplier for European energy grids, natural gas futures in Europe violently spiked by nearly 30% the moment the plants went offline. The chaos is spreading everywhere. The American diplomatic compound in Kuwait took a direct hit. British military personnel stationed at an Iraqi base in Erbil faced heavy bombardment. Tragically, at least 7 U.S. service members have been killed in action across the Middle East. Iran has successfully executed revenge strikes on a minimum of 27 separate regional bases housing American military staff. Back home, an FBI intelligence memo quietly alerted California police departments about a potential Iranian drone terror plot, though Reuters later clarified it stemmed from one unconfirmed source, and the White House aggressively denied any active threat to the American homeland. The human suffering inside Iran's borders is incredibly bleak and escalating daily. The Iranian Red Crescent formally reported almost 800 casualties, while independent human rights groups strongly argue the true death toll has easily surpassed 2,400. According to Iran's deputy health minister, 31 critical medical centers have sustained massive structural damage and 12 are entirely out of commission. A horrifying incident occurred in the southern town of Manab, where a primary school for girls was destroyed during a bombing run. Investigative journalists at Reuters suggested American jets were likely the culprits, while the Pentagon claims they are still reviewing the incident, with anonymous sources blaming heavily outdated targeting coordinates. Across the border in Lebanon, 687 individuals have died since the IDF widened its offensive, including 98 innocent children. Yet, despite this unimaginable scale of regional destruction, the massive political boost Netanyahu gambled on has completely failed to materialize. Polling data published while he was still broadcasting on Zoom indicated his political coalition would actually lose a crucial seat in upcoming elections. A major driving force behind launching this war was his desperate political strategy to secure power ahead of early Israeli elections, potentially happening by June or July. Al Jazeera analysts stationed in Ramallah reported that the prime minister truly believed a massive war effort would rally the nation behind him and guarantee his political survival. That plan is drastically failing. Furthermore, his infamous corruption trial is still moving forward. The Israeli Pardons Committee officially evaluated his request for legal immunity and firmly decided he simply does not meet the basic legal requirements. And the one global ally he desperately needs, Donald Trump, went on television to brand Israeli President Isaac Herzog as entirely weak, pathetic, and a total disgrace for refusing to grant Netanyahu that pardon. Netanyahu purposely avoided defending Herzog on camera. He casually brushed it off, stating the American president has the right to express his own opinions. He heavily emphasized that his personal relationship with Trump is 100 times more solid than any prior diplomatic bond, bragging that they chat on the phone every single day. However, Trump is publicly signaling his impatience, telling the media he wants this global crisis wrapped up extremely fast, bluntly asking, when exactly do we stop? Netanyahu desperately requires this military campaign to drag on long enough to dodge a prison sentence and ride a wave of wartime patriotism straight into Election Day. Their ultimate strategic timelines are moving in completely opposite directions. And as this diplomatic rift continuously expands, figuring out what a victory actually looks like for either of them becomes mathematically impossible. Please share this breakdown with anyone actively tracking this global crisis. We are 13 days deep into this massive military campaign, and Iran is still rocketing ballistic missiles straight into Israeli cities. Netanyahu openly confessed he cannot guarantee the downfall of the regime. American intelligence agencies insist the Iranian government is nowhere near collapsing. Mojtaba Khamenei is successfully commanding his military from the shadows. The most vital oil checkpoint on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz, remains completely locked down. Global crude oil shattered the $100 ceiling. The IEA was forced to dump 400 million barrels of emergency reserves. Up north, Hezbollah is casually dropping 200 rockets a day into Israel. 7 brave American soldiers have lost their lives in the crossfire. The operation burned through over $11 billion in less than a week. And the absolute mastermind driving this entire bloody campaign hosted his premier press conference through a Zoom screen while incoming warheads literally forced his own citizens into underground bunkers. The officially declared goal was the complete destruction of the Iranian government. 2 weeks later, that government is standing tall. The rockets are continuing to fall, and absolutely nobody on the world stage can accurately explain how this nightmare actually ends. Thank you so much for tuning in. I truly value your viewership. Jump into the comment section down below and let's get a conversation going. Who do you honestly believe is winning this war right now? Has this conflict spiraled completely beyond control? Leave your thoughts. Also, please hit the subscribe button and like this video to keep up with all future updates. Tap the video on your screen right now to watch my next breakdown.